Almost afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Brad Kane, editor of the Worcester Business Journal, and we're very happy to have you all joining us for this special Small Business Strategies webinar. In this session, we'll explore a variety of key issues facing small business owners and highlight some services available to support your small business or startup goals. Our panel of small business service professionals will provide their experience and expertise to help companies work through current challenges with a focus on marketing, financial, and operational strategies. This session is brought to you by the support of our webcast sponsor, Middlesex Savings Bank. They have been supporting our webcast series over the past year and a half, and we thank them for their commitment to providing valuable programs to the region's business community. Before we jump into the panel discussion real quick, just a couple of notes. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. Also, some of the panelists may respond directly in the Q&A box to your questions. Today's webcast is also being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you after the event. All right, time to get started. On the panel we have joining us today is David Bennett, who is the Senior Vice President at Middlesex Savings Bank. Richard S. Cheney, the Regional Director of the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center Network for the Central Regional Office located at Clark University in Worcester. Brianna DeBella, who is the Principal of Studio DeBella, an integrated creative and marketing agency. And Karen Pieltier, the Executive Vice President for the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. All right, jumping right in. Karen, I'm gonna direct this one to you first. But I would like all the panelists to answer this one as well. So Karen, if you could kick it off. Just laying out the scenario for you. Let's say I make the absolute best pizza in the world, the best pizza that anyone has ever tasted. So I decide to try to profit from this. I want to open up my own restaurant. But other than making great pizza, what are the things that I need to know to make that business successful?
Well, first I'd want to try your pizza. So I'll be the judge if it's the best or not. My first advice to somebody in that scenario would be make sure that entrepreneurship is right for you. It really is a lifestyle and a major commitment, not just for you, but for your family. And so there are resources out there, certainly online, but even locally with like CWE has done some seminars sometimes about is entrepreneurship right for you? That's a Center for Women in Enterprise. I would just say, make sure that this is the right path and that you shouldn't just be working for a different restaurant owner making the most amazing pizza, if that's what you want to do. So secondly, I would say, you need to put together a team, and certainly there are some great resources locally where you can access some information and free resources. There's an organization called the Worcester Business Resource Alliance, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about their members throughout this whole program. But it's a network, of regional business service organizations like the Chamber, like the Small Business Development Organization, and many others, where they can help you along the way with wherever you are in the path. If you're needing to find a location, if you're needing help with permits, if you're needing, help finding talent to help, make the pizza and all the things. So I would definitely assemble that team. There's a great analogy that I heard recently. I might have been one of you on our pre-call, I forget, but I love it. And it was that if it wasn't for the right team, Beyonce would just be singing in the shower. Like you really need the people to put you in the right position to be successful. And so I would say that tapping into these resources is the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Brad. I think I'd just like to add that make sure you start off on the right foot and pay attention to the accounting. Intuit actually did a survey, and 40% of the respondents, business owners, said they felt like they were financially illiterate, yet 81% of them did their own books and took care of their own financials. So you need to make sure that's taken care of so you know where your business is at any point in time. It'll provide the opportunity for you to make sure your taxes are correct, keep you out of trouble with the IRS. That's important. Also, knowing and understanding your revenues and expenses will help you with pricing, as well as profitability. And then finally, cash flow. You'll know how much cash you have at any particular time. So that's something we see quite often is people neglect the accounting side of the business.
I mean, both those answers really resonate with me. I think one of the things Karen had mentioned early on about knowing yourself, one of the things you can do is take a kind of a brief look at yourself and do I have the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur, and also obviously being aware of the numbers and so on. I use in our office, we constantly use the business plan as a paradigm to help us focus down this path. It's a path that takes some time. People want to open a business and they come to us and we'll say, at least I will make it clear to them, this is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen over the weekend. It's going to take some time. A couple things I try to make clear to people when I'm trying to open a business, not to scare them away, but the fact of the matter is 80 to 85% of businesses fail the first year, primarily because they're undercapitalized. And there are other reasons too, but that's one of the large reasons. And it takes usually about anywhere from 3 to 5 years from the time somebody starts to think about opening a business to actually opening a business. You're not required to take 5 years to plan, but it does take some time, some effort, and a lot of consideration. And as Karen said, this is a real life-changing event. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to open a business because I want to spend more time with my family, I'm going to say, well, don't open your own business. But again, you'll hear this from me constantly, is the business plan. And I actually rephrase that to be not business plan per se, but rather funding proposal, because it does have a different connotation than a large 70-page report, which you could be seeing some graduate student with a business plan, as opposed to, maybe 5 to 10 pages of a narrative and a full financial model.
I'll just add in, if it's about pizza specifically, this city is a very competitive place to open a pizza shop. A couple of years ago, apartments.com said that Worcester had 34 pizza places per 100,000 people. So that just to say, we're apparently the #1 pizza loving city in the country. But just know that it's a competitive market. So understanding where your business will fit into the grand scheme of your local or regional market, wherever you plan to compete in, and knowing how you'll be able to attract customers who might already have their favorite pizza shop. How will you incentivize them to try your pizza? And how will your brand differentiate itself overall? Maybe it's the best pizza, but if your shop doesn't look great, or if you're bootstrapping some of those things in the beginning, just what's the curb appeal? So you'll have to kind of jump over those hurdles a little bit to get the market to be interested in you, and understand who the best audience fit is for you. So those are the types of questions and considerations to make, at least from my perspective, from a marketing angle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Dave, I think I'll go to you next, because business is about a lot of things, but let's say that the focus is money. So let's talk money. Now, just looking at the attendee list, I'm going to go on a limb and say most of them are probably not just starting up a business tomorrow and maybe have established a business for a little bit now. But let's talk a little bit more about financial literacy for business owners. Like, let's say I'm running my own business now. Let's say I've done it for a year, maybe 5 years. What are the things that I don't know that you can tell me?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on that, and also what do banks like us look for in terms of financial literacy. First off, people may wonder why a business would come to Middlesex and stay with us like they do. And I think what we see from business owners is probably something that will resonate with you folks out there who do own a business. And that's that they're frustrated by long selling cycles and slow pays that make cash tight. They're very concerned about having to pass on business opportunities. And then as they grow, they're challenged with the need to invest in infrastructure, staff, or production. And that's where we come in to help, either directly through the bank or through our network that our lenders have developed. But as far as the skills they need, I'm going to touch back on those financial statements again. You want to understand your financial statements. That income statement, that'll show your revenue and expenses over a period of time. The balance sheet will show your financial condition at any point in time. And then, of course, your cash flow statement will show your sources and uses of cash themselves. But it all starts with number 2, really, the bookkeeping. That's kind of the foundation. And it's something that you have to make sure is taken care of. It's the grind of every day recording your business transactions. And if you do it yourself, it could be quite burdensome. A lot of people outsource that function to get the expertise and actually save their time. Few other things, you want to make sure you do a plan for the future and do budgeting and invoicing. You want to get those invoices out first as quickly as you can. They have to be timely, and then you want to make sure you collect those accounts receivable as quick as possible, because that really is the best source of cash for your business. And then finally, building business credit. You want to take a loan with a bank and develop a track record, and then develop those relationships with your banker, and that's going to earn you some credibility. So as you get into some of these other challenges that you may face as a business, the bank will be there to help you. Once you are at that point, what does a bank look at? Well, we're going to look at a few things. We're going to look at your character, credit, and capital. What I mean by that is your personal credit is important, does play into that. We want to see what experience you have, what kind of tangible support you bring to the table, and how much equity you've invested in the business. We want you to have some skin in the game as well. We'll take a look at the business, and this is again where financials are important. We want to make sure it has the capacity to repay the debt and to meet your goals. What's the opportunity? Are you buying a building? You need some working capital. Is the structure correct? And of course, collateral. Do we have the collateral that the bank needs to kind of backstop the obligation we're about to commit to you? We're the cheapest source of funding out there, but we also need some security as well. I guess my final comment on the topic would be knowledge equals credibility. So to play off what Richard said, you have to know your business plan, and you have to be able to speak to it yourself. Don't rely on a third party or CPA or a business advisor. You need to talk about it. And bankers don't like surprises. We want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that's the only way we can help you out. So those are a few comments on the financial side.
Yeah. I think Dave's point is quite well taken. I think one of the areas we focus on quite a bit, whether we're working with a nascent entrepreneur, one who wants to open a business, or one who currently has a business, but primarily the ones who are trying to open one, is what kind of experience do you have in the industry? I mean, I think that's extremely important. If somebody comes into our office and says, I want to open a restaurant, and I ask, well, tell me about your experience. Well, my wife and I go out to eat every 3 nights. That's not experience in the industry. Your industry would be knowing, how the business runs, sous chef, prep chef, front end, back end. That's an important consideration. Other ones would be the conditions. Do the conditions support the business? If it's a business that is very old, and in other words, I would open up a blacksmith shop. Well, I'm not really sure that's going to work, given this current economic and political social conditions we live with. So those things, plus, as Dave may mention, cash, collateral, credit, these are critical things. What we do in our office is quite often with all of our clients, we'll build a financial model that really mirrors exactly what the lenders are looking for. We've learned this over the last 20 years that when David talked about the ability for the business to cover the debt, we focus our attention on building a model that will illustrate that, among other things. Is this business has the ability to manage and reduce and retire the debt?
Great. All right, Bree, kicking it over to you for a little bit. So obviously, you know a lot about marketing as well as market research. I guess, how should businesses incorporate both into their operations? Like, what are some of the first steps they should take?
Yeah, before you jump into marketing strategies, I think it's important to do the market research. So some of the questions and things you want to identify about your audience is going to be their demographic details, and that might include gender and age, education level, income, what zip codes they live in, or what zip codes you're targeting, potentially even what are their spending habits. This type of information helps you build a customer persona, and that it's a lot of companies use these customer personas to really help narrow their messaging and their calls to action to really target who they're going after And typically what we like to say is if you're speaking very generally about your product and service and offering, you might not be reaching anybody because it's too general. So sometimes it's better to be specific. And the way you do that is through understanding who your target audiences are. And market research is where you get that information. Other information you might want to gather is where is your target audience spending their time? A lot of times these days it's online. So what are they online searching for to find solutions to problems that you might solve for them? What are your competitors saying? Is another part of market research, is understanding what the people in your market are doing to already reach these customers. And maybe you can find out who they're targeting depending on how detail oriented you are in sleuthing their websites and their material. There's also some qualitative market research you can do. So going back to the pizza example, trying all the pizzas in your neighborhood, understanding how yours qualitatively matches up, what's better about yours, and don't just take your judgment for it. Ask other people, and specifically people that are in your target audience. What do they think? And really take that feedback to heart when you're making decisions. And then also quantitatively, how much of the market share are you actually looking to go for? So what slice of the pie are you trying to get? And understanding that what your goals are for your company, your marketing is always going to help achieve business goals that you have. So, measuring your marketing efforts and budgets with the goals that you're trying to reach is important. And you kind of have to know a lot about your market and your audience before you can do that.
Great. All right, Karen and Richard, throwing it to you next, and let you go first. Both of you obviously run or are part of organizations that support businesses, but what sort of support networks are in place to help small businesses, and what programs should entrepreneurs be a part of? I know there's a lot of broad-based business support, and then there's some specific industry ones. So. Sure.
Yeah, good question. And I Karen had mentioned previously about the Worcester Business Resource Alliance and so on. There's those organizations we can talk about in a second. Actually, two things I'd mention right off the top. One, I'm really surprised. Well, I shouldn't say surprised. I'm just really amazed. Worcester has just a plethora of organizations that can support small business owners and entrepreneurs. And I started doing work with the small business development centers in Connecticut originally, and while there's a lot of support there, I just really am surprised and thrilled by the amount of support that's available through the Worcester area and Worcester County. We're part of the Small Business Administration, so there's actually 3 technical assistance centers that sit underneath that SBA umbrella. Karen had mentioned one, CWE, the Center for Women and Enterprise. They are an organization that provides advice and counseling and so on to small business owners. Another one that's been around for many, many years, you might have heard of, called SCORE. They're an organization of people who are, they volunteer their service. And then there's small business development centers like mine. We're not volunteers. We get paid for what we do, but we also are required to earn, I think, 24 hours of professional development annually to maintain our status. Actually, in Massachusetts, there are 6 actually centers like ours. That's Pittsfield, Springfield, Worcester, Fall River, Salem, and the newest one is out to Newton at the Mount Ida campus. Well, we're somewhat different. We all provide the same fundamental service. And I had mentioned previously what I try to do, and everybody who works in our office tries to do, is really kind of focus in on the business plan as that paradigm. It's a guide, and that guides us, down a path. We want to open a business, and for example, what are we selling? What's the value-added proposition? What are we selling? To whom are we selling it? Why are they buying it? We look at we ask for about the competitive set and so on. So, these other organizations, CWE, SCORE, SBDCs, I think they all fundamentally provide the same type of service. Then on top of that, we belong to a number of other organizations. I sit on the WBRA board. We see that monthly meetings. We also work with chambers, another a really important organization to provide service to businesses. Certainly, the Worcester Chamber is one of the finest chambers I've ever worked with, been involved with. So, and there again, there's all sorts of organizations. We belong to the Latin American Business Organization, which is a very strong organization that supports the Hispanic population in Worcester. So these are some of the organizations that are out there that provide services. All of these services are free. Well, at least CWE, SCORE, and SBDCs are free. I can't speak for other folks, but all of our services are free and all of our services are confidential. And I guess we would say they're comprehensive. We cover pretty much all of the fundamental areas of business, from startup to management to marketing to bookkeeping. And again, what David said earlier about bookkeeping, I strongly advise people to probably use a bookkeeper to do their books, but certainly understand fundamentally how the books, how you capture a transaction and you post it to a ledger, and how these all that data is captured so you can produce financial statements periodically to evaluate the performance of your business. So that's my 2 cents, so to speak.
Yeah, great points, Richard. And I would just add that, when you look at the WBRA, and you will get that link sent to you after this webinar, there's, more than 20 organizations. As Richard said, we have a really rich ecosystem here to support businesses. But there is some information on that website around, what's different about each one. And so some might be access to microfinancing. The city of Worcester has a microloan, Chamber has a microloan, Accentria has one, RCAP, so there's those kind of resources that are available. And then there's seminars and networking and things like that. Brad mentioned one thing about industry specific networks, which I think is really critical. So that would be, the Chamber has a number of different industry sector roundtables. So manufacturing, healthcare, that kind of thing, construction, real estate. And then there's also other organizations in the area too that support specific industries. So, Mass Manufacturing Education Partnership would be one. MBI is another. So, I would tap into those specific things if it's relevant to your industry. And then lastly, I would just say to get involved in the business community as a whole. It doesn't have to be the Chamber, although that's my obvious recommendation, because there's some real learnings that you can get from other business owners, even if they're not in your same industry sector. There's referral groups, so that if you don't have this big staff, people, and you're just starting out, you can have other business owners who are working with multiple business owners who might be, your potential clients, make introductions for you or tell, your story. And then there's other just learnings that you can get from other business owners. And, one thing that I notice a lot with my retail members is I'll go in their store and they curse the day they ever purchased this point of sale system that they have that does all their, credit cards and everything. So, it's just those kind of decisions that you've got sold as a business owner. But it's good to sort of check with other people, what do you use? Do you like it? What if you couldn't make the decision over again, what would you choose? Who do you use for your accountant? Who do you use for your, all those kind of things are great resources and information that other peers in a business organization would have, and happily share with you.
Great. And then Karen, I guess I'm just going to throw right back at you. The Chamber, I know, is the largest chamber in the state. The Worcester Chamber is, and I'm assuming you interact with many businesses. So just from what you've seen from all of them, and then after Karen, I'd like to open up to everyone. What's the best practices? What are things that businesses should be doing? What have you seen that's successful?
There are just so many. So that is a very broad question. Some things that I was thinking that really resonate with me from the Chamber perspective is being hyper-focused on relationship building and your reputation. I think that, people sort of think that everyone's your customer with social media and everything, but really in a community, people are talking and they are sharing their experience and they're posting online their experience. And so you want to be really guarding your reputation as a business, making sure that your employees are living out, what your company values are, and that your network is an extension of your reputation as well. I think that's very important. Another one would be spending, watching where you're spending your money, and that should be an important thing that you're tracking and focusing on. Specifically would be like spending locally. I go into cafeteria at an employer locally, and if they don't have Polar, I'm kind of like, why? We have this awesome, amazing, local distributor that you could be supporting that organization. It keeps the dollars that you're spending local too, so that's creating more jobs, more residents, more people that can be your customers. So it just really does make sense. Another thing, the chamber has a partnership with the Boston Chamber of Commerce to help companies and medium and smaller businesses track their diverse owned businesses spending. So that's supporting businesses that are owned by, women, people of color, that kind of thing, so that you can make sure that you're, spreading your dollars equitably across different populations that you want to be supporting and help grow. And then lastly, I would say just really cultivating your staff. People don't always realize, but it costs more to recruit and onboard new staff than it does to retain the staff that you already have. And so just investing and one way you can learn from that is just, engaging, like I mentioned, with other organizations. The chamber has a human resources roundtable. They share best practices, understanding what your staff are looking for, communicating with them as far as benefits or flexibility, those kind of things that are important to hires, and trying to keep them happy and loyal.
Yeah, all good points. I one thing that really just jumped out at me when Karen was mentioning this. Two things. There are many best practices we can follow, but one, to me, is you cannot really be communicating enough with your customers. In other words, I was telling our clients, you should be routinely surveying your customers and finding out, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And then most importantly, when you get that information, act on that information. It's just sit in your drawer and take up space. You should really respond to what people are saying. This is very important. When you talk about relationship marketing, this is one of the key areas of relationship marketing. Just survey your clients, and you can't be too close to them.
Yeah, at a high level too, I think it's important to have a business focus on what they do well, not try to be all things to all people, and especially not try to do everything yourself as the business owner. And while it's very difficult, many of our successful business owners find some time to carve out for themselves to avoid burnout. So those are some high level comments.
Just go back to what I was saying before about the business plan. I don't want to harp on that, but what it does, it's not a document that you write every year. It's a document you create once, and it's a roadmap. And then once you have it, then you just you fine tune it based upon what's happening in your business world, your economic, political, social, technological environment. And as these things shift, you may or may not have to make some adjustments to the model, particularly to the financial model, where you're estimating my revenue and expenses per month. If your estimates are relatively correct, then you keep moving forward based upon your mission and priority. If you find that what you're estimating is incorrect, you're overestimating revenue or underestimating expenses, then you have to make some corrections in order to make sure that your business is going to survive.
Well, while we're talking best practices, let's also talk about what not to do. Just got a message to question from the audience. So, Richard mentioned, Richard, if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, like 80 to 85% of small businesses fail in the first year. Yeah. So maybe I'd like to hear from all four of you. What would you say are like the two, I'll limit you each to two. What are the two mistakes that businesses make that lead to failure, sort of self-imposed difficulties?
Well, I believe, when I say 85% failure rate, I'm pretty sure it's 85%. It could be fluctuating between 80 and 90. It really, it it's an average. So if you take certain industries, some don't have a failure rate that high, but some industries have a higher failure rate. They're more risky endeavors. The one thing that pops out to me all the time is undercapitalization. You know, I've heard it once, I've heard 1,000 times people saying, "Like, bootstrap my business." Well, I think it's a wonderful story to tell, but it's not that successful. If you start your business with not enough capital, you might find you're into the 3rd, 4th, 8th, 10th month of the first year, and you might be seeing you're not operating profitably yet, but you can see it as a proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. But if you don't have enough capital, I mean, if you don't have enough cash, and you have negative cash, you're not able to pay your vendors, you're not able to pay your utilities, you're not able to stay in business, and that's where you'll run out of cash. You'll stop your business. So having proper capitalization right up front, proper working capital, I think is critical. The other thing would just be the ability to make sure all of the fundamental areas of your business are covered. As Dave had mentioned, you know, rightfully so, keeping your books, proper books, maintaining the books so you have correct data that can provide financial statements on a regular basis, sustainable basis, that are accurate so you can evaluate the performance of the business. These are critical. So you may be wonderful at sales, but you may be horrible at bookkeeping. And if you do it yourself and you do it poorly and you don't have accurate statements, then you don't have good information on which to make decisions regarding your business.
I could tag team right off that, because I think one thing that goes with what Richard said about having, you know, being fully financed. One of the things that we saw over the pandemic, and I mean, who could have seen this coming really, but was that 30% of Latin-owned companies across the United States have closed during the pandemic. And one of the reasons sort of stated or noted is like the PPP rollout that was available by the SBA and was a lifesaver to so many businesses. The first round was really dependent on the business already had a pre-existing relationship with a commercial lender. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you want to have a relationship with, I think that's a great relationship to have, just even, you know, for your, you know, savings and checking and whatever for your business, if you don't have a loan, because that's an important relationship. The bankers, the commercial bankers here are just great partners to business owners, and they refer to a lot. We get a lot of referrals at the chamber, and I know that other business services providers do as well. And so I just think that that's like an example of an important sort of relationship to be fostering right from the beginning. That could be a resource.
Yeah, good point.
I want to add on something Richard said too about your business plan and capital. I see people who they treat marketing as something that they only need in an emergency situation where they don't have enough customers, or they're looking at their books and saying, oh, our runway is getting smaller, we need more business right away. Whereas marketing should be something that's built in from the beginning. You should have investment in marketing, and then you should have a percentage of your revenue that fuels the marketing budget that's ongoing. Because even if you don't need that new business, there are opportunities to improve your brand, to expand your brand, to really do things that elevate the overall quality of your business. So if it's not about marketing to get customers, there's a lot of different reasons that people might want to use marketing. Sometimes it's just awareness, or giving your customers some kind of bonus because they've been loyal, which is something you can do if you have a marketing budget established and constantly being fueled by your business. When you don't have that and you're treating it like an emergency, you might not even have the capital needed to achieve what you're trying to get out of that marketing spend. And another mistake I see often is marketing that you can't measure the results of the marketing program, or it feels so ad hoc that, you know, you don't have guaranteed results sometimes. So choosing marketing strategies where you have a certain number of impressions you know you can get per your dollar spend, or choosing marketing partners where there's some proven relationship there that you know it will have a benefit to you, instead of just putting out an ad that you might not even have a code on that ad, so you don't even know if anyone sees it at the end of the day, or if anyone's used it to come to your business. Those are some basic mistakes I see in the marketing realm.
Yeah, I mean, not much left to say, I guess. I echo what Richard said. Cash is king. That's number one, and of course, the financials. But also, I alluded to earlier about doing everything yourself, and be it trying to market yourself instead of using someone like Bree, or doing the books yourself instead of a bookkeeper, or human resource issues get very complicated once you have employees. Not only does that suck your time away, but it also prevents you from focusing on what you're really good at. And that's the idea that you have for your business, whatever that might be. And that drags people down sometimes.
So
Yeah.
let's jump off of, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
No.
maybe jump off of that to talk a little bit about outsourcing, because, you know, Dave, you're right. You obviously can't do everything yourself. And if you try, you're probably going to fail. Bree, starting with you, when do I know when I should outsource and to, you know, an outside provider, or hire someone part-time, or hire someone full-time, or what's the rule there?
Yeah, I had a former employer who used to always talk about like the time versus money paradox. If you have money to spend, then it's good to use that to hire people that can help you. And if you have more time on your hands, that's sometimes the best way to spend your time, is to DIY things a little bit or bootstrap. And I can speak to just my experience as a small business owner as well. My business is a service-based business. So I did start out with just me, but the first thing I hired for was a part-time bookkeeper and for my accounting, because again, those are things I knew I needed to know, but at the end of the day, they weren't things I'm passionate about to, you know, make it my focus. So having someone I can always check in with to give me the skinny on the business is important. And absolutely a huge time saver for me, because for her, it's easy. And for me, it's a little more complicated to wrap my head around. I'd rather focus on the creative side or the team management side, which kind of segues me to, you know, in the beginning, as you start as a business owner, sometimes you are doing a lot of the work or a lot of the production, whatever your type of business is. But as your business grows, you might start managing more. And that might be something that, whether you've done it in the past or not, is it the place where you want to spend most of your time? It kind of brings in the idea of having, whether it be, for me, it was a project manager, someone who can oversee all of the projects going on, where I could focus more of my time on strategy and creative direction. For other people, it might be tech support. I'm lucky to have a partner who's very good at technology, so he's my go-to tech support. And then with clients, I see people who like to DIY their brands, which actually I have no problem with. I sell brand design, but it's still something I think early on in businesses, you may have an idea for what your business brand should be, and maybe the name and the logo and how you're messaging to your audience. But realistically, in the first 3 years, you're really going to find out who your audience is, who's actually buying your services, who's responding to your brand as it is, or are people not responding to that and they're more responding to you. I think over time, it takes some time to kind of understand what it is that whether you have a niche or just a specific quality about you that makes people want to do business with you. And all of that information can help refine a brand over time. So if your brand's working, then great. But if it's not working and 2 years down the road, it's still not working, that would be a great time to hire somebody, because clearly the DIY job hasn't done it for you. And also, if your brand's successful, you know, how can you take it to the next level? So now you're getting customers and things are going well, but maybe it's time to invest in a better website that has more function and has more direct messaging to your target audience, so you can grow further. So I think those are all good trigger points for when you know that it's time to hire out.
You know, one of the things that we constantly are commenting to our clients on is making sure that you spend time, your time, based on or focused on what makes the cash register ring. In other words, you create a product, you provide a service, you're selling it, you're delivering it. Those are important factors. So when you want to hire people that are going to be supporting you in that work. So for example, Bria talked about marketing, for example. Hire a marketing professional to build your marketing plan or build your web page and allow you to go out and do what you do best, as opposed to spending time on something you may not be very good at. I've seen so many web pages people have designed on their own, which have been at best mediocre, compared to ones that are really exceptional and easy to use. That's important if you're obviously selling through the web. And right now, most people are selling through the web, whether it's a personal service or a product. Information is found on the web. So I think spending time there, spending money on that is kind of important.
I would just add, I couldn't agree more that the decision-making factors are time and money. And so when you're thinking about what your skill set is and, how long it would take you to do something that you could hire an expert for, there are tons of resources locally. And, now you can work with anybody globally, that obviously wasn't my recommendation, but you can hire a, payroll firm from anywhere in the world. You can, there's a lot of resources out there, but I would say, recommend, obviously, if people look locally, you can look in the chambers directory. You can ask, like I said, about the point of sale example, ask another business owner, hey, who do you use for, your accounting, and how much does it cost? Do you think it's worth it? Like all those questions, people are going to be very eager to tell you what they already know because they're, in it too, and they want to share. So I think that business owners are really a great network, very gracious with their expertise, and they want you to be successful because they know how hard it is, and they know what a big decision it was. So I would say ask around, ask the chamber, look for referrals, but then do hire outside of your expertise.
Well, great. Next one from our audience. And Dave, I think this one hits right in the heart of you. It comes from Stephanie Ramey, who, unless there's more than one Stephanie Ramey, I believe runs two small businesses, which is the Worcester Railers and then the relatively new O Shop. And she is asking about establishing credit for businesses. Will banks do general review of financials to make recommendations, how much credit to request, etc. If there's a direct need with the small steps in lines of credit. I'd imagine small steps in lines of credit will help demonstrate accountability for when need arises. How much time does it take for a business to build good credit? Dave, I'll leave that in your capable hands.
All right. Well, there's a lot there, but certainly if you're a business, you can always use a line of credit. And that's a great place to start. You might have to start on the small side, but as your company grows, it's easy to increase that line of credit from the bank's perspective. And what you want to do is make sure you provide good financials. Now, the bank is not an advisory capability, but we will make suggestions and observations as you go forward, as you get to know your business banker and as they get to know your company. But for specific advice, you really should rely on a finance professional like your CPA or Richard's group out at the SBDC, something like that. It takes time, probably a year or two before you can kind of develop that credibility that you understand what a line of credit is used for and how to use it. It's really for short-term working capital needs. So it's not a situation where you should draw on that line and leave it maxed out for months and months. It should be used for those short-term needs while you're collecting receivables, for example, or to take a discount from your supplier. And then from the bank's perspective, it'll be going up and down throughout that period. And that shows that you're managing your finances correctly and that you're ready for maybe for a larger line of credit down the road.
Well, I was just saying, quite often, if I see a business with significant amounts of seasonality to the business, I might suggest a line of credit as opposed to say a debt financing. Instead of taking a loan, you might want to just do line of credit where, if you're a restaurant on Nantucket, there's significant seasonality in your business, and a line of credit might be very appropriate there, for example.
Yep, absolutely.
And Bree, following up on your comments about marketing and making sure it's not something that you are ignoring until you absolutely need it. And I imagine the answer to this question will vary wildly by type of business. But I'm starting out a business. What percent spend should I set aside for marketing?
It does depend, I think, on the industry. But I mean, I would say, and I would say too, like just in general, it can scale over time. For example, most of my business in the beginning, the first couple of years, was entirely referral based. And so I didn't have a huge marketing budget for my first couple of years even planned out. Although as I got more business, it's something where I put a little aside for further investment in the future. A business that's a retail shop or brick and mortar, I think it's a totally different story because you're going to need to get people to be at your location. So I think, again, it kind of depends, but Richard might have a more specific answer for this, but I've seen advice which is like 10% in the past to save and put out towards marketing expenses.
You know, that's funny you should say that, Bree, because I recall when I started doing this years ago, when I say years ago, the 90s, if we would look at let's say an income statement where you have your revenue and your operating expenses, and you do look at percentages, what percentage of your operating expenses is represented by wage or by utilities? Quite often, you know, advertising, merchandising, promotion, otherwise known as A&P, would represent a large portion, greater than wage. Things have changed dramatically with social media marketing. It's a lot cheaper than the old days where you would invest in a spot in radio, TV, and a spot in say or outdoor transportation, outdoor media. That was very, very expensive. It's not nearly as expensive, but it's still expensive. But that's the old stuff, as opposed to social media. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want to spend a fair amount of money on your marketing budget. So I would say certainly 10 to 20% of your operating expenses may be in order. And then beyond that, making sure that you are, if you're using, for example, say Google Analytics, you actually use the analytics to determine to what extent my marketing plan is actually delivering the results that I expect to have them delivered.
Yeah, he actually brings up a really good point about websites needing to function, not just for your customers to understand who you are and to reach you, but to also track how they're engaging with your site or how your advertising has, affected their traffic to your site. People use specific landing pages for certain types of campaigns to track things like that, or creating certain banners or sections of your site that have really specific calls to action, lead generator tools. Whether it's something, maybe it's like a free download, one sheet, a white paper, something that gets them to, get a little bit more information about you, but also proves your value to them. And then from there, what's that next step they take? Maybe that PDF. I worked with a nutritionist, and she had a free PDF, tons of advice, but the whole PDF was filled with affiliate links. So she's making money anytime someone took her advice, clicked on those links, and bought things from Amazon. She also at the end had a special offer for people who wanted to become a client. Maybe they got really jazzed by this PDF, but they wanted her advice, and there's a special code there. So she always knew when her lead generator actually resulted in a customer. So there's different tactics like that that people can take to make sure that what they're investing in is having an impact.
Great. So we got about 10 minutes left. I guess one thing I'd like to hear from the four of you is navigating the current environment, because the global national economy has been anything but predictable for the last 2 years, up and then down, and then a big tear up. And now, like in the last, let's say 3-4 months, it's been inflation. And of course, there's supply chain disruptions and labor shortages. The stock markets have had a rough couple of months. Richard, I'll throw it to you first.
Other than that, things are fine. So
how do you navigate this environment? Is this constantly changing?
Well, let me be very, very blunt. There are certain areas that you can't really navigate. I mean, well, for example, if you're I had a client small client who does vehicle transportation. You see, he can move 2 or 3 cars at a time behind his pickup truck. Well, he's spending, if it's diesel, he's spending over $6 a gallon for diesel. And so all of a sudden the cost of doing business are skyrocketing. And whether or not it's not easy, it's not impossible to pass all of that on to the end user for obvious reasons. So there are certain things that are just really problematic. But one area I focus on quite a bit, particularly with clients where I know I'm anticipating scaling up and anticipating increased demand in what they're providing. They get to a point where they're not capable of delivering it by themselves, but rather they have to build in place a manufacturing or distribution kind of structure where you're adding people, hiring people to build the product or to package the product or get the sales out and so on. So having multiple suppliers is what I'm getting at. With this with this supply chain problem, we had a client who was buying raw materials from China. The quality was excellent, but it went from taking approximately 4 weeks to taking almost 18 weeks to get it transported to here. And on top of that, the price had increased dramatically. Finding multiple suppliers for your raw materials or just suppliers who are doing business with multiple vendors, I think is very important. You do not want to have all of your focus, proverbial eggs in one basket, for fear that person may go up in flames or may go out of business or for whatever, have multiple suppliers. That could be one way to hedge against supply chain disruptions.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, there's always headwinds in the economy, and the ones you listed, Brad, are particularly strong right now and could actually tip us into a recession this year. But bottom line is we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know where all this is headed. We don't know what effect the Ukraine war will have on the world as well. But there are things that we can control as individuals. And I think some of these we've mentioned, but communicate to your partners, customers, and clients all the time. Stay in front of that. Grow your online presence for visibility and commerce. Take a look at, freelancers and contract workers, as well as for your own people. Make sure you understand remote work, its pluses and minuses, and how to manage it, because profitability and production could be affected by that. Focus on your people, obviously, too, but ramp up your networking. That's a source of new business and resources to help you through this time. And then finally, remain nimble. We stay amazed here at the bank at what we saw during the pandemic and how small businesses adapted. They changed on the fly. And in some cases, they actually reinvented themselves overnight. So that's a big advantage for small business. So you got to remain nimble and willing to change.
Karen Bree, thoughts on how to navigate an ever-changing business environment?
I would add that, a lot of the ways that people have pivoted during the pandemic were forced to in order to survive are things that we love and want to keep forever. Curbside pickup, yes, please. Mobile ordering, yes. So I think that it's just about being responsive, and to Dave's point, flexible to what your customers want or what's going to be that next thing to keep you relevant. And I think all the specific factors that you listed, Brad, are, sort of another reason to be spending your money locally and creating a local economy and ecosystem for your business, so that, you're not so dependent on the gas prices for your product, or you're not, so things might cost more if you're buying it from the local, your restaurant, you're buying your tomatoes from a local farm. Maybe it does cost a little bit more than a big, large food distributor, but you are, have a relationship with that particular, manufacturer, in this case, farmer, and can get your product potentially, more easily than somebody else.
I'll just add too, on the point of staying nimble. I mean, you can hire a consultant or a contract worker, or even, a firm like mine. It doesn't need to be a full-time retainer. It doesn't need to be a 6 to 12-month contract all the time. Sometimes it can just be a strategy session, or perhaps putting together a roadmap for your business that then you can leverage with your team. I know I do this, and sometimes I've seen others who do this as well. Like if it's about onboarding a new tool and then training your team on using that tool to then help self-sustain the activity moving forward, whether it's marketing or something else. But trying to think creatively about how you might stretch your resources to achieve what you're trying to do, to improve your overall marketing and brand when times are a little tough or your budget's a little tight. And we did see quite a lot of new clients come in during COVID, only because they had to lose their in-house resources. So they were still having a need. So they were seeking help outside their, full-time employees. Some of that business has then shifted now that we're kind of getting back into, people are getting employed again, but also some of that business has stayed and grown since then. So it really depends on what a good fit for your business is, the way you want to work with people. Do you want people to be physically with you and, you know, a W-2 employees for you, or is that once in a while consultant going to be what's needed to keep you on track? And that sometimes just comes down to personality and best fit for the business owner.
Great. So 5 minutes to go, and we do want to be respectful of our 12:30 finish time. I know some of you actually have a hard 12:30 stop as well. So I'm going to go around the group one more time. I'm going to ask you to maybe keep your response to maybe tweet size or slightly large. And just opening it up broadly, maybe one thing from each of you. Just, you know, someone walks in the office, you have 37 seconds to give them advice. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give a small business owner, either one that's starting out, one that is like a year old, one 5 years old, 20 years old? Dave, I'll be unfair and go with you first.
Okay.
What do you think?
I would say keep an eye on cash flow, do cash flow projections, make sure you have a cash reserve, make sure you're only spending cash on essentials. And if you're going to spend money, spend it on outsourcing those non-core functions.
Again, being primarily a numbers guy, I can't agree more with Dave on the financial side. You know, and I said before, and I'll mention again, it's not so much you have to create a 20 or 30 page or 10-page business plan. That's not the point. The point is that it's the process you go through. This posing the questions and answering the questions. What am I selling? To whom am I selling it? Who am I competing against? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And most importantly, what are my expectations for revenue and operating expenses? And what do my capital needs for my business? These are really the primary areas we want to focus on. And the fact that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
I would say to tap into the available resources for you here locally, build your network, and cherish your reputation.
For mine, I'd say, you know, before you go to a creative or marketing service provider with a request like, I need a new website, and this is what I want, maybe think about approaching them with, here's my problem in my business, and how could marketing or creative help me solve this? Because they might be coming up with solutions that you might not already be thinking about.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to all the people that joined us today. And once again, a big thank you to Karen, Richard, David, and Bree for your participation and the valuable insight. That was too much for me to even keep track, but you know, there's a recording of this webcast that you will receive through an email, that everyone will receive through this email. Once again, special thanks to our sponsor, Middlesex Savings Bank, for their support of this webcast. Okay, everyone who's participating, our panelists, have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.